Hello and welcome to the fourth week of Rainy Season Gardening Journal. Uh, it's quite a short one this week. Not a great deal got done. I went to town, which was a mistake. I did do some gardening that is not included here. Mostly a decent bit of scything, but it was hot and I was not wearing a shirt, and nobody needs to see that. So that is not included. But you will notice some slightly shorter than you might expect grass in a couple of places, just because occasionally I do things without charging a camcorder and taking it with me. So anyway, first up was Kalanchoes that we have growing along the side of the drive. I think it's a Kalanchoe, at least it's very similar visually to other plants that we have, which I know are Kalanchoes. It is perennial, whereas some of them seem to flower and then die back. Once it's flowered, the flowering stem will often then branch out and you get a bigger, bushier plant. That's what's happened here. The flower stems from 2 years ago are now leaning over the drive and starting to close the space up a bit. So basically, before they get run over, I wanted to cut them off and propagate them out. It's not too aggressively invasive. I don't know if it's a native species. We do have native Kalanchoes. I don't think this is one of those. But I've never seen it spread any further than the base of the plant itself. It seems to spread very easily by vegetative propagation, but I've never seen seed formation, even though the birds and the bees certainly enjoy the flowers in season, mostly sunbirds. One of the main reasons I have decided that I do like this and I want to propagate it more is this particular thicket. Over the dry season this year, we had a lot of one of my favourite types of katydid, which is the East African noisy cricket, which I'll pop a picture of up. Was calling from inside here. Quite a few of them were calling, and it's only in the last few years we've started getting that species on the property at all. So, if I can make more of the places it likes to call from, I will. You may also recognize these from when I put in the first video a picture of a dragonfly sitting up. That was just before our first big storm of the season. Some of the phantom flutterers, which are a really beautiful dragonfly. Some of them had decided to roost in here, having come in on the wind that the storm brought with it. So basically, for propagating these, you can root them in a separate pot. In the dry season, I probably would put them in a pot rather than directly in the ground, because this is not somewhere that gets watered very regularly. There's a drip line, so sometimes once or twice a week. That might get turned on if I remember during the dry season, but most of what's along this line is drought tolerant and needs to be dry during the dry season. There's turmeric here, which will sulk if it gets too wet during the dry season, and Jacob's ladder, which is very tolerant of drying out, even though it will also tolerate water during the dry season. Basically, just while the ground is still reasonably moist, not too waterlogged, but still moist, just basically putting the bare ends of these into the ground. Any bits that break off or any bits that aren't quite the right shape to shove into the ground, just scrape back a little bit of soil and drop them on. They will root too quite readily. And hopefully, after this is all thickened up a bit, we should finally have something just about thick enough to convince the chickens that they don't want to dig up the rest of the turmeric that they haven't already destroyed, which they do. I mean, it's safe to say that about half an hour after I planted this, all the chickens were investigating it, and a fair few of these have been kicked out, but most of them are still in the ground, and I've replanted the ones that they did kick up, so we should get a decent little chicken-proof thicket eventually. After that, it is a Dracaena was my next, should we say victim? I think victim is probably the most appropriate term. This is again a very, very abuse-tolerant plant. This is actually growing right next to a building where it keeps growing into the roof, presumably when it was planted, which is, as with many things before I was born, it was not expected to get as big as it did. It got cut back hard with a chainsaw at some point, probably about 20 years ago now. I'm not safe with chainsaws. I cut myself badly enough with a standard manual pruning saw. I hate to think what would happen to me if I used an electric tool. But basically with these, you don't even need to find a node. You just cut them anywhere that they're decent and woody, and you'll have a decent growth point, and they will usually branch out very merrily from any injury, provided there's a decent amount of light, and provided they're not too dehydrated, they are very, very tolerant. Again, this is a stuck record. This is everything I plant is very tolerant, because I am... Oh, well, I put plants to the test, should we say. I have been known to restrict watering just to see how long peace lilies will go without water, which is over a month in the dry season if you have enough shade for them. So you might recognize the spot where I'm planting them, and this is actually the same area that I've done a lot of the work. The thicket that I'm currently poking about in at the back there is the sicklebush thicket where I impaled my foot the week before last, still limping by the way. Now, I wanted to grow row crops and vegetables in here in the longer term, and that is part of the reason I'm planting the Dracaenas, because Dracaenas, native or non-native, they are very good places. They provide very good places for wasps to nest in, paper wasps and potter wasps. The paper wasps are the wasps that will sting quite readily, but they're also perennial predators of caterpillars, which is really valuable because at least here in Zambia, caterpillars are among your main vegetable pests. You can also use pandanus, the screw palms, for this, and yuccas or cordyline. One of the benefits of Dracaenas, especially some of the non-native ones like this, is they're very tolerant of both drying out, whereas some of the ones from the north of the country are not so tolerant of that, but also of waterlogging, which the yuccas are not happy with. Pandanus are very happy to be waterlogged, but they do not like to dry out, certainly not in the native species, and certainly not in full sun, in the way that a lot of Dracaenas are very happy to. So you'll find that once these have settled in, and really again it is just a case of dig a hole, put it in, put the soil back in so it stays standing up. Once these are settled in, I'm hoping that wasps will start nesting among the tops, which is what they do on all the other Dracaenas I've ever planted, but also that these will act as markers for where I've put basically my sort of low-lying hedge plants, so that they don't get cut down again. So Dracaenas for that purpose are very good. You will notice one of the dogs has been put in a wheelbarrow. He gets sulky after a little while walking around in wet grass, because it had rained just before I did all this. So then a little bit of scything with my shirt on, just so you can broadly see how badly I do it. This is a bush blade. It's a very short, thick blade, which is more tolerant if I hit small trees that I didn't want to be there, just clearing the paths. And then digging some furrows, well, not digging, really just scraping back the grass, just to expose the very surface layer of the earth. So what I'm going to be doing here is I went to South Luangwa, the brilliant, wonderful, magical South Luangwa. I'll put a couple of pictures up so you can ooh and ah, I guess. And I left a couple of corn cobs which needed eating, and when I got back they were really thoroughly dry. This was before all of this started, so I thought, well, I'll keep them and I will plant them out, because provided I get more than 2 corn cobs, I've got free mulch, plus I get a decent return on investment, so we'll see. Mostly when you see maize growing here, you will see very clean soil underneath it, which is partially a regulation by the government, but also seems to be to reduce things like cutworm. I'm hoping that by actually having a fairly continuous living system beneath it, I will actually find that the predators of pests like cutworm and maize beetles are actually present too, so I shouldn't lose too many to those, but it's a process, and you never know if this works out. Maybe next year I'll be growing enough to take down to a mill or something. So yeah, I guess that is more or less it for this week. Quick trigger warning for people who don't want to see death. You've got until 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, click off. So there was a lizard buzzard died, which is a bit perplexing. Hoping to find out that it was entirely natural. There's also been a dead nightjar, which I think is a little bit more explicable, because we do have, with the snails starting to come active, we do have a lot of fireflies around, and a young nightjar might very merrily snack on a firefly and then no more nightjar. Lizard buzzard, I'm hoping it was the same sort of thing. I couldn't see any signs of obvious injury. Our neighbours have in the past decided that the way to keep their chicken feed safe is to kill all birds. Hopefully they're not at that again, but I couldn't see any evidence that they were. So yeah, so that is it for this week, and I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.